Okay, we're going to talk about Chapter 1 and the course introduction. And then we're going to talk about security with respect to information security. First off, we were going to talk about these key terms. Okay, so security is the degree of protection against danger and damage or any kind of loss, um, and also criminal activity to your asset or hardware, software, uh, physical security, what have you. But security is that protection. We're going to talk about the CIA, which is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. These are your three tenets of security. You will hear it called CIA, which is not the three-letter intelligence community organization. CIA, in this respect, is in regards to information security. Confidentiality ensures that your data is not disclosed or given to someone that doesn't have a need to know. Um, and a lot of times your data is um, has different classifications, like secret, confidential, or top secret. Um, so that if that data is labeled that way, then you've got to make sure that those people that have a need to know um, has access to that. If they don't have a need to know, then you've got to prevent them from having access to that data. So integrity also ensures that your data is not modified or tampered with. For instance, if you have a database and that someone changes or modifies the data in that database, um, that the integrity ensures that that data is correct and like it was originally entered into that database. Availability ensures that your system is up and running so that your data is available when it's needed. For instance, if you have um, a denial of service for on the server, that means that that server is not available for you to access that particular data. Excuse me, let me do this later. Okay, let me go back. Non-repudiation means that it's a validation of a message's origin. That means that if you send a message to someone, you cannot say that you didn't send it. So non-repudiation means that um, it validates that that message originated in from that particular sender. Okay, an asset is something that has value to an organization, and that can be hardware, software, intellectual data, um, anything that is has some kind of value. Normally, we talk about an asset as being um, uh, computers and networks, servers, um, hardware, and software. Um, but it can also be people of that organization. Okay, a threat is anything that would have a potential to cause the loss of one of those assets. So you can have different kinds of threats, internal, external, um, people generated, or human generated, even weather generated. And a threat agent is a person or entity that would attempt to carry out a certain threat. Next, we have vulnerability. So if you have a weakness in the system or some kind of open port that's uh, not protected, you may have a hacker that would be able to access that system and do some damage. So that would be a vulnerability. Also, not updating your operating system updates or even security patches would also be another example of a vulnerability. You may also have insider threats. For instance, employees that may unintentionally or intentionally um, be a vulnerability if they don't have the correct awareness, education on security, or they don't have the correct background uh, investigations to uh, to understand if that person could be um, swayed to provide confidential information to a hacker or a competitor or what have you. And now an exploit is an act, procedure, or piece of software that takes advantage of that particular vulnerability to carry out an attack. So an exploit is uh, the actual act of carrying out an attack and stealing information or bringing down a server or what have you. Okay, next we're going to talk about some so security concepts. And the assets, threats, and threat agents. Okay, a threat agent carries out the threat. For instance, a hacker. So an example is North Korea attacked Sony and uh, got information on new movies that were coming out. They got all the personnel information and they bought down, I believe, around 80% of their servers and um, their host or the employees' computers. So your assets, threats, threat agents, and vulnerability uh, computer or security concepts. A vulnerability could be a disgruntled employee. So they have some issue against the company that they work for, and they want to take out some kind of retribution acts against them. So we've got assets, which is um, anything of value for that organization. A threat is um, some vulnerability that's going to exist there. And threat agents are hackers or can be a disgruntled employee. There are other things there as well. You could have nation states like North Korea. Um, Vulnerability. There's a weakness in the system that is there that a threat agent can take advantage of. And then an exploit is the actual act of taking advantage of those vulnerabilities. Okay. For discussion, think about what challenges does a professional face on a day-to-day basis. Um, they may have to constantly look at logs, also constantly update operating systems and the security patches, make sure the security patches are there. You might have what's called a 0-day exploit, and there may not be at that point there may not be some solution or patch that you can apply. So what are the workarounds? You'll have to understand where to go and how to do your research and find out what those mitigations are. What's the difference between integrity and non-repudiation? Well, integrity is that data has not been changed. Non-repudiation is um, uh, you can't um, say that this message didn't originate in this particular place. So non-repudiation is a term that shows that that message originated in um, from that particular sender. And what are the three main goals of CIA security? So you've got confidentiality, integrity, and availability. What are the key components of risk management? So your risk management, you have got to know what the threats, the vulnerabilities are, and what's that risk of those threats. And you also want to have a risk management plan. What do you do when this happens? What are the three types of threat agents? Okay, next one in section 1.2 is defense planning. So we're going to talk about layered security. It's also known as defense in depth, and talk about a layered security model. Okay, so layered security is an approach that combines different types of security controls and defenses to create a cumulative effect. So you'll have uh, fences, locks, door locks, uh, cameras. Um, uh, you might have a server room that has cipher locks on it. Uh, and then you will have firewalls, uh, any kind of automated type uh, network monitors and so forth. So layered security model is an approach that defines 7 layers. And we'll look at those 7 layers. I'm going to skip down here and just show you the 7-layer security model. So you have data, application, host, network, perimeter, physical, policy, procedures, and awareness. So these are your 7 layers of security, and all of these things will provide you defense in depth. Okay, so the first one, you have policies, procedures, and awareness, and so you have to have these things in place for your employees um, and your system administrators so that they'll know exactly what procedures to follow in case they have some sort of uh, exploit or threat against them. Policies, you might want to have a um, uh, user awareness program, and that's an education program on maybe like a yearly cybersecurity program. So you're going to have policies on your bring your own device policies. For instance, will that person or your employees have access to use their own uh, uh, cell phones inside the building? Can they access the network with that particular cell phone or any mobile devices? Next, you'll have physical. So your physical includes your fences, um, cameras, locks, those sorts of things, even firewalls. Well, your firewalls are actually going to be in your perimeter. So you have the perimeter is your wireless firewalls, routers, switches, and your network. And so your network is going to have different types of things there as well that's going to help prevent um, infiltration, network monitors, um, stuff like Wireshark. You're also going to use like audits and logs. Your host, are your actual computers or your assets that are connected to the network. And you'll have different things there that's going to protect those. So your HIDs or host, some kind of host-based security, firewall or antivirus, and so forth, anti-malware. And then you'll have your application level, like your uh, web-based protections, um, database protections, and so as well as your data that's on those particular servers or the data at that lower level. Those classifications we talked about, that data is locked down based on certain uh, GPOs or group policies. For instance, if I have a set of uh, or a group of people that are in the financial department and they have access to see just the financial data, but whereas another group in that organization will not have access to that data. So your GPOs are going to uh, allow user access to certain types of data. And then last, you've got your user education. That is also called awareness. And most of the time you have a policies that have yearly requirements to have training on cybersecurity or what have you. And the user education is a major part of that preventing insider threat, whether it's intentional or unintentional. Mostly unintentional, the user education is going to help. Intentional, regardless of user education, the intentional ones are or something you'll have to deal with separately. So in your essential security training, your employees are your primary targets, and they have to understand what the attack strategies are, especially social engineering, and you have to identify the internal threats, and also have a company security policy where everybody reads and signs off on it. Okay. So for this section or this chapter, or this section actually, you want to know what layered security is, that defense in depth, and it's the 7 layers. And a countermeasure is something that is going to help mitigate those threats and also vulnerabilities. You will have something called mitigations, and those are solutions to any kind of exploit or threat or vulnerability that you have out there. Um, how can the countermeasures reduce the risk of a particular threat agent being able to exploit a vulnerability? And that's where those policies, procedures come into play. Okay, so that is chapter 1, and most of the chapters do have several. I think some of them have over 200 slides, so I'll try to condense them. Um, and if you have any questions, please let me know. You can go ahead and start working through the Chapter 1 Test Out Security Pro lab for Chapter 1, and there are a few um, tests and labs in, I believe they're just tests in this first one. I don't believe you have any labs in the first chapter. Okay, so I'll talk to you again when chapter 2. Thanks.